feel like it's an extended April Fool's joke. Their demands are preposterous. Who the heck are you? I don't know whether to laugh or cry. It could not be more obvious what radical Islamists want. They want to take over the West. They say it. More human rights have more freedom in Israel than they do in any Muslim country in the world. That's just a fact.
The mood and the atmosphere like in Israel right now with the ceasefire going on with Iran and what's happening?
Yeah, I mean it's one big sham scam as it always is. Like what ceasefire? I mean, Hezbollah is firing drones at Israeli soldiers every hour, basically, and as a result, Israel is retaliating and bombing Lebanon. So there's no ceasefire. I guess no one wants to declare the ceasefire dead because Trump wants it to, remain alive. But there's no ceasefire, and the whole thing's a sham. Even with the ICC, it's ridiculous. I mean, we're playing stupid games with them. They're not going to surrender. They're never going to admit defeat. They're only going to understand, strength. And so it's time to just do, what we need to do and finish the job already. It's like, stop playing around, take off the gloves, finish the job.
Yeah, is that like do many people share that view on it, that a lot of people actually want Israel to finish the job? Is that like the general consensus on it?
I think that's the general consensus across Western society, not only in Israel. I think normal people understand that the IRGC is a terrorist, genocidal, murderous regime that murders tens of thousands of Iranians in the streets without any shame, and they do not have a right to exist. And so, America and Israel needs to basically rid the world of the IRGC and, I'd say denazify Iran and, put a legitimate regime in place and free the Iranian people.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff is happening at the same time. You have both Iran and then you have the situation in the north of Israel with Lebanon and Hezbollah over there. I just read the other day that a lot of people in Israel are scared to live in the north because they're scared of what about if Hezbollah is going to do like a October 7th style attack? What's going to happen? What can you say about this? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the Israeli civilians who live in the north are the most heroic Israelis there are. I mean, they've been bombarded for years nonstop by Hezbollah and others. And, I don't know if I'd be able to live there. If I lived there, if I'd stay there, I don't know. And I don't blame anyone who doesn't, who wants to leave. I get it. Do I think that Hezbollah is going to perpetrate what we saw in 10/7? I want to believe that Israel learned its lesson and that could never happen. But who knows in this crazy world,
Yeah, definitely, and I guess the fear is even more tangible now that we have seen what Hamas were capable of. What do you know about the latest on Hamas? I read somewhere that they were actually willing to let down their weapons and surrender somewhere. I don't know if that's true. And what do you think of the developments there?
They're trying to push off the inevitable and so we'll give back a couple of hundred rifles. Give me a break. They're not putting down their weapons, and the reason they're not putting down their weapons is the same reason that the IRGC is not surrendering, and that is because in radical Islam, the concept of surrender does not exist. And as far as they're concerned, they'll blow themselves up, they'll murder innocent people, and as long as there's one terrorist who's still alive and still standing, they'll declare victory. It's absurd, but it's a deeper issue of the fact that radical Islam and Western values cannot coexist, and the West seems to have not yet understood that, and it's tragic. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. It could not be more obvious what radical Islamists want. They want to take over the West. They say it, and the West just refuses to believe it. And unfortunately, we know how this ends. It's not going to end well.
What do you think about those Iranian demands that they have with the U.S.? They were going to go there to Islamabad with J.D. Vance, and one of their demands is that they want to continue enriching uranium, that they won't budge on that. They want to continue doing. What do you think about these crazy demands?
I feel like it's an extended April Fool's joke. Like, did they not get the memo that they have no leverage? Like, they can't make demands. They were obliterated militarily. They're being obliterated economically. Like, they're completely isolated diplomatically. Where do you think you have the right to make demands? You have zero leverage. I don't, what they should be doing if they were normal, rational people is getting down on their knees and begging for mercy. But again, radical Islam. So yeah, their demands are preposterous. Who the heck are you? What leverage do you have? They've zero leverage. So I don't know why they think they can make demands.
Here in Norway, we had the big 78th birthday for Israel outside of the parliament, and I was there and I was holding a speech also. And right across the street, we had this huge pro-Palestinian counter demonstration where they were screaming like death to the IDF and Viva the Intifada, and they were screaming like nobody's going to be able to protect you, and child killers and all these crazy things that we're seeing here in Norway. What are your thoughts about how Jews are being treated in the diaspora across Europe?
Obviously, it's disgusting. It's vile, repugnant, but it's also not our first rodeo. Shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. In fact, I'm surprised it took this long for the anti-Semitism to surface. But yeah, I mean, again, anti-Semitism's been around since, the creation of the world, basically. And so, it doesn't surprise me. But on the other hand, it's shocking how otherwise rational people stand up and declare Globalize the Intifada. Do they know what that means? Like, do they understand what they're calling for? They're literally calling for suicide bombers on their streets. It's again, mind-blowing to me, staggering that otherwise normal people have no problem saying from the river to the sea. Do they understand what they're saying? Do they know what river and sea they're talking about? Because what they're calling for is the complete annihilation of 10 million Israelis. I mean, are they okay with that? But the answer is, again, it goes much deeper. People somehow justify October 7th. Oh, Israel was occupying Gaza. Like, are you insane? Do you know what the disengagement was? Like, there was not a Jew in Gaza. But when it comes to the Jews, like, any lie goes, and we could say whatever we want, and the Jews, who are 0.025% of the population, are the cause of all the world's problems. And this is not new. This is something that's always been around. It's as absurd as it's ever been.
Yeah, because it's crazy what they're able to say. And I thought that it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts about where does the balance go between freedom of speech, because obviously people have freedom of speech and freedom of thought, and one can express oneself and say whatever you want. But where does the balance go with what is threatening and what is inciting violence, inciting terrorism? What do you think about this? Should one be able to say whatever you want on the streets towards Jews?
I mean, freedom of speech has its limits. Let's start with that. But I think a good litmus test would be if someone's, shouting, chanting something on the street, would that person be okay if a person came with an Israeli flag and declared Am Yisrael Chai? Would they be okay with that? If not, then they don't want freedom of speech. They just want to incite violence. If they're okay with that, then we can have a discussion. But, 99% of these people declaring Globalize the Intifada and protesting in pro-Palestinian marches, if someone shows up with an Israeli flag, we know how that ends. So, again, let's not play the whole freedom of speech game. They're not interested in freedom of speech. They're interested in inciting violence and murdering Jews. Let's just say it as it is.
And also, I find the contrast interesting when you step back and look at it, because these pro-Palestinian demonstrations, they're so concerned and caught up with death, while we were there with the white and blue balloons and the Israeli flag and celebrating life and the creativity and the strength of Israel, celebrating life, really. They were there chanting like death to the IDF and death to Israelis and death to Jews. They're so concerned with death in itself. What does that say, you think, about that whole movement?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. In other words, you could go to any pro-Israel march and look how people are behaving, and go to any pro-Palestinian march and look how people are behaving. If that doesn't show you who's good and who's evil, then there's something wrong with your moral compass. I mean, literally, you will never see an Israeli march ever with people that are, massacring, assaulting and harassing other people. They're just sitting there with their Israeli flags, singing or saying Am Yisrael Chai. And then you go to any pro-Palestinian march, literally any, and you'll see that they are chanting murderous chants, and they're calling for annihilation and the murder of Jews. So how could a person not see that contrast? The only way a person cannot see that contrast is if they don't want to see the contrast. That's it.
How far does freedom of speech extend actually in Israel? Would it be able for a pro-Palestinian movement to have like a demonstration there and chanting those kinds of things, saying death to the IDF and calling for the death of soldiers and death of Jews? What would have happened?
I mean, you have to understand, Israel, in our longing to be the moral country that we are, we sometimes go too far. And the fact that there are anti-state, anti-Zionist Arabs in the Israeli parliament, it doesn't get more absurd than that. But actually it does, because despite the fact that we have anti-Israel Arabs in our parliament, we're still called an apartheid state. Like, you couldn't make this stuff up if you wanted to. Like, Arabs play a central role in every single part of Israeli society, in the parliament, on the Supreme Court, in entertainment, in sports, in medicine, you name it, in entrepreneurship. Arabs are everywhere, and they live with more freedom of religion and more human rights than in any Muslim country in the world. I'm just going to repeat that. Muslims in Israel, as well as Christians, of course, have more human rights, have more freedom in Israel than they do in any Muslim country in the world. That's just a fact. That's an indisputable fact. And if you dispute that, then you just don't know what you're talking about. Just do some research. So, the fact that we're giving them, the anti-Israel MKs a podium in Israel's parliament is insane. But it's even more insane that despite the fact that we're doing that, we're still labeled an apartheid state. Again, it could not get more preposterous.